When the cameras switched on that morning, no one in the BBC studio expected what was about to unfold. The room was bright, cold, and orderly, producers whispering cues, assistants adjusting lights, the usual calm before a broadcast. But in the middle of that polished set was a quiet storm disguised as an ordinary interview. The host, famous for her sharp tongue and even sharper confidence, sat with her usual polished smile. Across from her was Daniel Reyes, a Filipino public school teacher flown in for a feature on global education systems. He was soft-spoken, composed, and almost invisible compared to the powerful guests the show usually brought in. Nobody knew he was about to flip the entire conversation and the world's perception upside down. The show began with its usual fast rhythm, headlines, reports, transitions. Then the host reached the segment on education. Her smile thinned as she turned to Daniel. "We've heard concerns that countries like the Philippines struggle academically," she began. "Some say the education system is weak, and that's why many Filipinos end up working abroad instead of leading industries at home." The words were sharp. They hung in the air like a challenge. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't shrink. He simply blinked once, breathed, and sat taller. Millions watching expected him to get defensive or embarrassed. Instead, he smiled, genuine, calm, almost amused. "May I ask a question?" he said politely. The host blinked, thrown off. Guests rarely asked her questions. "Go on," she said. Daniel leaned forward. "Before this interview, did your team check global literacy rates or international education reports?" The host froze for a split second. "If anyone did," Daniel continued, "they'd know the Philippines consistently ranks with one of the highest literacy rates in Asia, and that we produce millions of graduates in engineering, healthcare, and science. Countries rely on Filipino workers not because we lack education, but because our education prepares us to excel anywhere." Behind the cameras, staff exchanged glances. The host attempted to regain her footing. "Still, your system faces major weaknesses." "Every system does," Daniel replied gently. "But results speak louder than budgets." His voice grew steadier. "Filipinos run hospitals in the UK, build cities in the Middle East, teach in the US, and innovate in labs across the world. If Filipinos were poorly educated, none of that would be possible." For the first time, the host sat back speechless. Daniel continued, his tone respectful yet unyielding. "Education is not measured only by money or buildings. It's measured by adaptability, resilience, and skill. Filipinos learn to thrive in any environment, even with limited resources. Many countries admire that, even if they don't openly admit it." Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. "So you're saying the criticism is unfair?" the host asked. Daniel chuckled softly. "I'm saying the criticism is lazy. People judge Filipinos without looking at facts." He looked directly into the camera. "Filipinos are not uneducated, we are underestimated." The room fell silent. The host tried one more angle. "If the Philippines is so strong academically, why do so many Filipinos leave?" Daniel responded instantly. "Because opportunity moves, and Filipinos follow it. That's ambition, not weakness, and many return home carrying new knowledge and skills. Migration isn't a sign of poor education. It's proof of global competitiveness." Comments flooded social media as the interview aired. Still trying to recover, the host said quietly, "It seems our research team missed some information." "It happens," Daniel replied with a warm nod. "That's why conversations like this are important." Then he opened his bag and placed documents on the desk. Global rankings, literacy data, lists of Filipino achievers in medicine, engineering, robotics, mathematics. The truth sat on the table like a spotlight. When the cameras cut to commercial, the studio transformed. Cameramen clapped, producers nodded. Even the host rose to shake Daniel's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for setting the record straight." Within hours, the interview went viral. Filipinos worldwide shared it with pride. Foreign viewers admitted they never realized how skilled Filipino professionals were. Some apologized for believing stereotypes. By week's end, the BBC produced an entirely new segment, this one dedicated to Filipino academic and professional achievements. At the center of it was Daniel Reyes, the humble teacher who spoke so quietly, yet shifted a global narrative. He didn't argue, he didn't attack. He simply told the truth. And the truth was powerful. But the story didn't end in that studio. Days later, Daniel received an email from the International Education Foundation. They had watched the interview and were struck by his clarity and courage. They invited him to speak at a prestigious global education conference in Geneva, attended by leaders from over 50 nations. Daniel was stunned. He was just a teacher from a small town. Now the world wanted to hear him. When he arrived at the conference hall, his hands trembled for the first time. He faced scholars, ministers, and experts from every corner of the globe. But he remembered the millions who had supported him since the interview. He stepped up to the podium and spoke with the same conviction he brought to the BBC studio. He shared stories of Filipino students studying under leaking roofs, yet winning robotics competitions. Teachers staying late into the night to help children succeed. Communities sharing one computer and still producing future engineers. Every word resonated. When he finished, the entire room rose for a standing ovation. Delegates approached him afterward, asking for guidance. Some invited him to train their educators, others requested consultations. Daniel stayed humble. "I'm not here to show off," he always replied. "I'm here to remind everyone that talent exists everywhere, especially in the places the world underestimates." When he returned home, he was welcomed at the airport by students holding signs that read, "You made us proud, Sir Daniel." But he insisted the real heroes were the millions of ordinary Filipinos striving every day. Soon, a scholarship fund was created in his name. Schools invited him to speak. Overseas workers sent heartfelt messages saying his interview made them feel seen and respected. Each time, Daniel simply said, "I only spoke the truth." The greatness was always there. Months later, the BBC invited him back. Not for a debate, but to honor him with an International Education Award. The same host who once doubted Filipino education now stood before him, handing him the trophy. "The world sees your people differently because of you," she said. Daniel accepted it on behalf of every Filipino student, teacher, and worker whose brilliance had long gone unnoticed. As applause filled the hall, he realized something profound. Sometimes one voice, spoken calmly and honestly, can shift how the world sees an entire nation. He entered the studio as a quiet teacher. He walked out as a symbol of dignity, truth, and Filipino excellence. And from that moment forward, wherever he went, he carried a message the world could no longer ignore. Filipinos were never uneducated, only misunderstood. Now, finally, they were celebrated.